Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to when food was cooked over the fire and menus were written in dust. Welcome to the Saloon, the smoky, rowdy, questionably sanitary heart of every Wild West town. Here, every dish tells a story. Sometimes a story you don't want to hear. So before you get truly comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is. I always love seeing who's joining this sleepy journey worldwide. Now please turn off the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that gentle hum, and let's ease into tonight's adventure together. You arrive dusty, sore and starving. The town is little more than a cluster of buildings, but the saloon looms large. Its crooked signs swinging in the breeze, music leaking out like it's trying to escape. You step through the door and smell sweat, smoke and beans. Always beans. A fire in the corner has been burning all day, maybe all week. A dented iron pot is hanging over it, blackened by time and regret. Its contents bubble slowly, defiantly. There's no need to ask what's for dinner here. The answer is always the same. Beans, thick, brown and stubborn. Some call it stew, some call it leftovers. Most don't call it anything. They just eat and hope for the best. The cook doesn't greet you. He doesn't need to. He ladles a scoop into a tin bowl and slides it towards you with the weary grace of a man who's fed too many men and received too little thanks. You sit at a wobbly table, dodging a broken chair and a sleeping dog. Around you, murmured conversations, card games, tall tales, someone trying to sell a tooth as a lucky charm, but all you notice is the steam rising from your bowl. Your first bite is hot. Too hot. You pretend you meant to scorch your tongue. It tastes salty, smoky, and like pork that maybe once had a leg. Possibly, the beans are soft, but not too soft. Their texture walks a fine line between satisfying and suspicious. You chew slowly, you survive. The cook glances at you. It's not quite a smile, but it's not a threat either. Around here, that's practically affection. Beans are the backbone of every saloon meal. Not because they're beloved, but because they are indestructible. They last forever. Feed everyone and never ask questions. Throw in some lard, maybe a scrap of meat, a handful of pepper if luck's on your side, and you've got a meal, a real one, or at least one that won't kill you before the gunfight does. You pause mid-chew. Something crunches. You decide it's just a roasted bean. You carry on. They say a good pot of beans can feed 6 cowboys, 1 mule and 2 broken hearts. They also say bad beans once started a bar brawl that ended with a horse inside the saloon. You're not sure which story is true, possibly both. Across the room, someone sneezes on a biscuit. No one reacts. You take another bite. There's a strange comfort here in the fire, in the bowl, in the creaking floorboards and quiet, gritty camaraderie of men too tired to complain. You're part of the rhythm now, one of the many who've sat, eaten and prayed. Their stomachs to hold out till morning. And this is just the first course, because tomorrow, if the salt pork isn't too salty and the biscuits haven't turned to bricks, you'll get to try the next delicacy of the wild frontier. A tough meat that might just outlive the man who served it. The next morning, you wake up before sunrise, not out of eagerness, but because the beans from last night turned sleep into a temporary concept. You shuffle back to the saloon, rubbing your eyes, wondering whether your stomach is still on your side. The door cacks. The dog is still asleep in the same spot. The air smells different today, stronger, smokier, and somehow saltier. Today's special salt pork. It's been sizzling over the fire, hissing like it's got something to say. Thick slabs of cured belly, chopped into questionable shapes and thrown into the skillet with all the grace of a man who lost his last tooth in a barroom bet. The cook flips a piece. It sizzles, pops, and releases a smell that could be hunger-inducing or slightly threatening, depending on how long you've been on the trail. You sit at the same table. It's the same dent in the wood. It's the same cup with a chip the size of a horsebite. And when your plate is served, it is exactly as promised. Salt, pork, beans, and something that might be a biscuit or a very pale rock. The salt pork glistens, not with oil, not with butter, but with sheer determination. You take a bite. It's tough, dense, like the bitter older brother of bacon who drinks too much and won't stop talking about the old days. You chew and chew and chew some more. Your jaw protests. The flavor is intense, mostly salt, a bit of smoke, and something that once hoped to be meat. It's not bad, but it isn't exactly pleasant either. Salt pork in the Wild West is a preservation miracle. Cured to within an inch of its life and packed in barrels with enough salt to summon rain, it could survive for months without spoiling. Or maybe it had spoiled. But no one could tell under all that salt. Either way, it was still food. It traveled well. It didn't rot. It could be chopped into stew, fried in grease, or gnawed on raw if you were desperate and had low self-esteem. And most days, you were desperate. It wasn't a luxury, it was insurance. If your beans ran out, your flour went soggy, and your horse decided it liked the next town better, you still had salt pork. A slab is always waiting in the saddlebag, like a friend who never leaves and never bathes. You sip some coffee to help it go down. It doesn't help. The salt sticks to your teeth, your tongue, and your memory. You swear you can feel your blood pressure climbing in real time. A man at the following table takes a bite and lets out a long, wordless groan. He's not sad, just accepting that this meal will outlast him. But there's comfort in that too. You know this flavor now. It's sharp. It's strong. It doesn't change. No surprises. The world outside may be full of gunshots and tumbleweeds, but this is predictable, heavy, salty, solid. The food equivalent of a stubborn mule that kicks you and then falls asleep on your leg. The cook watches you struggle with the biscuit. He hands you a knife, not to cut it, but to defend yourself in case it strikes first. You glance out the saloon window. The wind's picking up. Dust rolls across the road. A storm's coming. Not rain. A human storm. You can feel it in the air. And the way the sheriff passed by earlier, eyes narrowed, fingers twitching near his belt. And just like that, the salt pork tastes a little better. Because in the Wild West, you never know what the next hour holds. But for now, you've got something solid in your belly. Someone bursts through the door as you finish the last bite, gnawing the edge like you're trying to win a challenge. Mud on his boots, sweat on his brow, and a story on his lips about a traveling merchant, a runaway horse, and the strangest stew this side of the Rockies. And just like that, your next meal is decided. Because if salt pork is the hard-earned tradition of the Wild West, stew is its chaotic experiment. You're still sitting at that creaky table. It leans slightly to the left, as if it's seen everything and prefers not to talk about it. The salt pork has just finished digesting or is negotiating terms with your stomach. When the saloon door opens with a loud noise to make everyone glance up, a man stumbles in, covered in dust, muttering something about stew. You catch a few scattered words, hoof still attached, maybe onion. And just like that, stew is back on the menu. Let's be clear, when someone says stew in a Wild West saloon, they're not referring to a specific recipe or even a known combination of ingredients. No two stews are ever alike. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're dangerous. Sometimes they defy classification entirely. But they are always hot, mysterious, and always served with the phrase, "eat it while it's warm," or at least before it starts moving again. The cook ladles it out without looking. You glance down at the bowl. It's brown. That's your first clue. Thick, lumpy. Things are floating. You stir gently with your spoon, hoping for hints. Maybe a chunk of meat, a carrot, or possibly a shriveled shoelace. A cube that could be potato or soap. Steam curls up in delicate tendrils. The smell is surprisingly pleasant, like garlic met regret, and decided to settle their differences. You take a bite cautiously. It's better than expected, savory, spiced. It's a little sweet, suggesting that someone added molasses or accidentally spilled in some whiskey. The meat is tender mostly. You don't question what kind. It could be beef. It could be a rabbit. Could be something that ran too slowly this morning. And honestly, that's part of the charm. Stew in the Wild West is a glorious gamble, a culinary coin toss. You never know what you'll get, but you know it'll be hot, hearty, and filling enough to make you feel brave again. It's food for survivors, food made from leftovers, cast-offs, wild guesses, and the occasional anonymous donation from the alley out back. The cooks use what they've got. If someone brought in game meat, it would be great to toss it in. If not, there's always beans or onions or root vegetables that refuse to rot out of spite. The broth is usually the same, simmered daily, week after week, soaking up flavor, secrets, and possibly a bullet or two along the way. You eat slowly, and each spoonful is a surprise. One bite is soft and smoky, the next suspiciously chewy. You pretend not to notice. That's the saloon style. Across the room, a man holds up something he found in his bowl. No one looks. The rule is simple. If it doesn't actively attack you, you eat around it. The stew warms your hands. It warms your chest. It almost makes you forget the draft from the window and the shouting in the back room. For a moment, you are full, safe, calm, until you bite into something that is not food. You put your spoon down slowly, respectfully. The cook nods at you, not an apology. It is just an acknowledgement that you played the stew game and lived. Outside, thunder rolls across the plains. Not sky thunder, hoof thunder. Riders are coming fast. Someone yells something about a bounty. Another voice replies with a curse and the scrape of a chair against the wood. You lean further into your corner. It's better to finish your stew and look unimportant. That's how you survive a night like this. Full belly, quiet eyes, and no opinions. But even as you scrape the last of the broth from your bowl, a new scent drifts from the kitchen. Something fried. Grease, heat, flour, and just like that, the stew is forgotten because nothing, not gunfire, whiskey, or even a full moon poker game, distracts a saloon faster than the sound of something hitting hot oil. The stew bowl is empty. Well, mostly. You leave behind one mysterious object that clenches against your spoon and stares back at you. It's best not to question it. You slide the bowl aside just as a new sound rings out from the kitchen. Sharp, sizzling, almost musical. Oil is frying. Every head in the saloon lifts slightly. Even the piano player mid-ragtime tune skips a note. Something is being fried, and not in that sad, greasy, desperate way. This is intentional, joyful, brazen. Fried bread, not quite bread, not quite anything. But out here in the Wild West, it's what happens when flour, lard, and extreme boredom meet a cast iron skillet and a cook with nothing left to lose. Your plate arrives. No words are exchanged, just a golden puffed up disc, steaming from the center like it's been waiting all day just to impress you. The edges are crisp and curled, the middle soft and pillowy. It smells like heaven. If heaven had a chimney and was slightly overcooked, you tear off a corner. It crackles between your fingers, then gives way to warmth and a slight chew. You take a bite. Hot, very hot. Your tongue briefly considers resigning, but you push through. And as the temperature fades, the flavor arrives. Rich, slightly sweet, slightly salty, and completely addictive. This is food without apology. Food that doesn't pretend. It's fried, it's flour, and it demands your attention. Fried bread is the saloon's treasure. A dish that only appears when the cook is in a rare mood or has stumbled into a fresh supply of clean oil. Some versions are plain, others are dusted with sugar, drizzled with honey, or in bold moments wrapped around a piece of bacon and called dinner. It's a miracle of survival, of food born from scarcity. No yeast, no oven, no measuring cups. Just flour, a bit of water, maybe some lard or butter, and a pan hot enough to make you question your life choices. Roll it, stretch it, drop it in, and stand back to listen to the symphony of survival. Around the saloon, everyone's eating it differently. One man rips it and dips it into someone else's bean juice. Another folds it like a taco and stuffs it in a leftover stew. Another just stares at it, reverently, like it's a golden plate sent down from above. You reach for another piece. The edges are crisper. It cracks slightly as your teeth hit it, then melts into something warm and comforting. It's not elegant, it's not refined, but it's perfect, especially with a cup of coffee that tastes like regret and firewood. You notice something strange. The saloon has gone quiet for the first time since arriving in this town. Not silent, but still. The kind of quiet that only happens when everyone is chewing at once, and no one wants to miss a bite. Even the loudmouth at the bar is speechless, holding half a fried bread in each hand, eyes shut, like he's remembering the face of someone he once loved. There's peace in this moment. A brief pause in the chaos of boots, bullets, and bad bets. Just you, a defiant disk of fried gold, and the warmth spreading through your belly like a lazy cat. But nothing lasts forever. From the back room, a shout shatters the calm. A gambler stands too fast. His chair scrapes. A pistol clatters to the floor. People tense. Hands drift toward belts. And yet the cook doesn't flinch. He's already reaching for another pot. A new one. He slams it down, wipes his hands on his apron, and picks up something thick, greasy, and slightly round. A whisper ripples through the saloon. Is that meat? Because if fried bread is luxury and stew is chaos, then the meat pie is the Wild West's most ambitious culinary gamble. Hot, sealed, portable, and always hiding something inside. The shouting dies down. Chairs return to their wobbly, uncertain positions. Whatever fight was brewing resolves itself or gets distracted by the scent from the kitchen. That smell, butter, meat, just a hint of char at the edges, is the scent of a meat pie. The cook works fast. No eye contact, no explanation, just dough, filling, and enough steam to fog the windows. A hand pie appears before you within minutes. Golden brown, crescent-shaped, hot enough to blister your confidence. It looks harmless, even inviting. But deep down, you know this is a trap wrapped in flaky pastry. You lift it. It's heavy, suspiciously so. The crust is crimped along the edges, thick enough to survive a wagon accident. You bite and meet heat, spice, and something meaty, probably. Hopefully, it's tender in a way, the kind of texture that might be stewed beef or yesterday's salt pork in disguise. You chew thoughtfully. It's good, maybe even good. There's onion in there, a bit of black pepper, perhaps some sage. And the meat? Well, it's seasoned generously enough that you stop asking questions. That's the unspoken rule of a meat pie. If it's warm, spiced, and doesn't bite you back, you accept it. Here, the meat pie is saloon gold, a full meal self-contained. You can eat one on horseback during a poker game or mid-arrament. You need no utensils, manners, or second thoughts, just teeth and a general disregard for structural stability. The crust is crisp at the edges, softer in the center, and charred slightly on the bottom. Classic. There's a streak of something red inside. It could be something else. Someone once claimed they found raisins in theirs. No one has trusted the cook since. Some towns have traditions, initials carved into the crust, decorative slashes on top to mark the owner. In mining camps, the edge was made extra thick so you could hold it with soot-covered fingers and toss that part to the rats or the ghosts, depending on how long you'd been underground. You glance around the saloon. Others are eating too. One man bites into something and blinks twice as if seeing a mirage. Another cuts him open with a knife and interrogates him at a crime scene. But no one complains because the meat pie does its job. It fills you up, warms you, distracts you. It's not fancy, but it's solid, honest in a dishonest sort of way. And in a world where most things have hidden costs, there's something comforting about food. That's exactly what it looks like. Even if you're not sure what that is, as you finish the last bite, brushing crumbs from your lap and dignity from your sleeve, the cook is already on the move. He's clearing pans, stoking fire, and pulling down a small jar of something. You squint. Is that candy? Because after beans, salt pork, stew, fried bread, and a hand pie that nearly bested you, the following item on the saloon's menu is one of its strangest surprises. Small, sweet, crunchy. Anna seed candy is the closest thing to dessert in this place, but is also a direct threat to your teeth. The last bite of meat pie still lingers on your tongue when the cook, using the dramatic flourish reserved for poker hands or arrests, places a small ceramic bowl in front of you. Inside, tiny glistening seeds, sugar-coated, sparkling in the lamplight like tiny gemstones with questionable intentions. You stare at them, they stare back. Aniseed candy, a treat, a rarity, and depending on the batch, a dental hazard. You pick one up. It feels weightless, harmless. You pop it into your mouth, crunch. Sweet. Very sweet. Followed immediately by a sharp herbal kick. Anise. Unmistakable. Like licorice with an attitude. The sugar coating cracks like old paint. And then your tongue wrestles with a flavor that can't decide if it's candy or medicine. It's not unpleasant, just opinionated and oddly refreshing. This is different in a place where most meals come with burnt meat and sorrow. Delicate, clean, sharp in a way that clears your head and maybe your sinuses. You imagine this is what civilization tastes like, if civilization were sold by the spoonful and dared to challenge your mers. Aniseed isn't just a snack in saloons. It's a multitasker, breath freshener, digestive aid, conversation closer. In towns where dental hygiene means swishing whiskey and hoping for the best, these little seeds are the closest thing to oral care most folks have. The cook passes by, nods once, and taps the bowl. Chew carefully, he mutters. Wise words, because some batches, especially the rushed or overboiled ones, harden to a degree capable of cracking glass or pride or both. The trick is to ease into it. Gentle bite. Respect the crunch. Don't let confidence get you hurt. You go for another, then another. The sweetness soothes something in you, or maybe just masks everything you've eaten tonight. Around the room, others are doing the same. The quiet crunches echo like polite applause, a shared moment of surprise and oddly satisfaction. Who knew the Wild West had candy? But it did. Not in neat rows or ribboned boxes, just in small bowls passed around quietly, made from sugar that traveled far and effort someone probably regretted. And still, it's here. It was a reminder that even in dusty towns full of gunpowder and grudges, someone somewhere still cared about dessert. Now the bowl is nearly empty. Just a few clumped-together pieces remain, stuck like nervous cousins. You resist the urge to scrape them up. You've had your share, and just as you lean back, letting the sweet ghost of anise linger in your breath like a closing curtain, a gust of wind slams against the saloon door. Dust, heat, boots. A traveler stumbles in, wrapped in rags, face flushed from the sun, clutching something tight in a cloth sack. He slaps it onto the counter with a grunt. The cook lifts a corner of the sack and raises one eyebrow. "Turnips," he says. You feel the room go still. The piano player pauses mid-chord. Someone whispers, "Oh no." Because in this town, when turnips arrive, someone's about to make a pie. The sack lay on the counter like a threat. Inside turnips, dusty, misshapen, suspiciously enthusiastic about being root vegetables. The cook stared at them like old enemies. Then, without a word, he rolled up his sleeves, lit the fire, and grabbed a mixing bowl with the quiet resignation of a man about to do something he didn't entirely believe in. Turn pie was happening. You heard the whispers ripple through the saloon like a spell or a warning. No cheers, no applause. A few patrons quietly drained their drinks and pretended not to notice. One man stood slowly, pocketed the remaining anise candies, and walked out into the night. Not in protest, but in silent self-preservation. You stayed curious, anxious, slightly hopeful, mostly hungry. The crust came together quickly. Flour, water, and maybe a bit of lard. The filling, that was the real mystery. You watched the cook chop, mash, and mutter, now peeled and defiant. The turnips were mashed with eggs, maybe honey. And was that cinnamon? You weren't sure if it was creative or cruel. It went into the crust. The whole thing slid into the oven. Time passed. The saloon grew quiet. Someone started humming. A card game resumed in the corner. And then the smell. Dear God, it was warm, not unpleasant, earthy, rooted, with a touch of sweetness that seemed to be trying very hard. It smelled like a compromise, like a vegetable earnestly attempting dessert with all the determination of a goat in a wedding dress. The pie came out golden on top, slightly cracked, steam rising from the center like a sigh. A slice was placed in front of you. It wobbled. You cut in. The crust was firm, not quite flaky but forgiving. The filling was smooth, an ambitious beige. You lifted the fork, took a bite and paused. Sweet, a little soft, like mashed potatoes wearing perfume. slightly spiced and very turnip. The flavor lingered on your tongue, unsure if it was proud or embarrassed. You chewed slowly. Not bad, not great. Edible, comforting in a way that confused you, like being tucked into a blanket that smelled faintly of soup. You weren't angry, just puzzled. Around you, others chewed with the same expression, a blend of politeness, survival instinct, and silent internal negotiation. Turnip pie was never meant to impress. It was meant to stretch supplies, to use what was there, to whisper dessert in a world with little sugar and even less hope. And in that regard, it succeeded. You finished your slice. The cook shrugged. That was about as much praise as turnip pie ever got. And just as the last crumb vanished from your plate, a new scent drifted from the kitchen. Grease, but not for bread, not for pie. Heavier, meatier, smoky, brave, and possibly something with feathers. Someone leaned in, eyes wide. "They're frying cheese," he whispered, and just like that, dessert was forgotten, because now it was cheese curd time. It started with a sizzle. A sharp, eager hiss tore through the quiet of the saloon like a match dropped into whiskey. Heads lifted, nostrils flared, even the dog near the piano opened one eye. Something was in the oil, something rich, bold, possibly illegal. Fried cheese. No one said it aloud. You didn't have to. The smell said everything, sharp, sweet, dangerously inviting. Now, in his most focused state, the cook stood guard over the cast-iron skillet like a priest overseeing a baptism. In his hand, a slotted spoon. On the stove, bubbling oil, golden and gleaming, and tiny cheese curds dancing like they knew this was their final performance. You waited, mouth watering, and then a plate was placed before you and piled high with freshly fried curds, still floating on heat, crackling softly like they were whispering secrets. You picked one up. Hot? Of course it's hot. You knew that. Did you wait? Of course not. This is the Wild West. You bit down. Mistake. Your tongue hit molten dairy at the speed of regret. You blinked back tears, nodded politely to no one, and chewed like that was your intention. The crust was light and crisp, with just the right snap. Inside, the cheese stretched slightly, buttery and salty enough to make you forgive everything you'd eaten that week. The next card was cooler, safer, perfect. Fried cheese isn't an everyday saloon food. It's too decadent, too unpredictable. You need oil, fresh curds, steady hands, and the ability to ignore the voices telling you this is a terrible idea. But when it happens, oh, when it happens, it's magic. Golden little rebels. Crisp on the outside, melty on the inside, and just greasy enough to make your fingers shimmer under the lantern light. Some people dip them in honey, others sprinkle them with pepper. Some just stare as if salvation had arrived in snack form. You have another and another. You're not counting anymore. For a moment, there is peace. You. The crunch, the soft cheese, and the satisfied chewing echoing gently across the room. The kind of silence that only comes when everyone is experiencing something better than expected. But peace here never lasts long. A soft sound interrupts the bliss. The unmistakable thunk of something heavy being set on the bar. You glance over. It's a jar. Cloudy, large, floating inside, pale shapes, long, bumpy, suspiciously curled pickled eggs. You hear someone gasp. Another chuckles nervously, 'cause fried cheese may bring people together. But pickled eggs separate the brave from the merely hungry. The jar sat quietly on the bar, clouded with vinegar haze and the weight of judgment. Inside, the eggs floated like forgotten relics of a culinary era no one had fully explained. Pale, suspiciously smooth, suspended in a brine the color of morning after regret. Pickled eggs. You'd heard about them. Everyone had, but mostly in whispers, the kind exchanged late at night between men too full to stand and too haunted to sleep. The barkeep said nothing as he lifted the lid. A soft pop, a waft of vinegar, and suddenly the saloon smelled of sharpness, memory, and challenge. He speared one with a fork. It gleamed. He set it on a plate, presenting evidence. You were the recipient. The whole room watched. No rules were saying you had to eat it. No voice dared insist. But to leave it untouched would be to admit defeat in the sacred silent ritual of saloon dining. You picked it up. It was cold in your fingers, damp, as slick as a river stone, or good intentions gone wrong. You took a bite. The outer layer was firm, a bit rubbery, giving way to a crumbly yolk rich with vinegar-soaked defiance. It tasted like boiled rebellion and pickled wisdom. A flavor born of preservation, necessity, and someone long ago asking, "What if we made this last forever?" And it nearly had. Pickled eggs aren't just food. They survive in glass. Long before refrigeration, these pale sentinels were the last line of protein. Salt, vinegar, and thyme. That's the recipe, and from the proper perspective, it's almost an act of love. You chewed carefully, slowly. The flavor was sharp, but not cruel. The yolk was dense, whispering of bar brawls and wagon wheels repaired by moonlight. This wasn't a dish to enjoy. It was one to endure, and in enduring to find strange comfort around you, others began to order the same. One man cracked his egg open and sprinkled it with pepper from a tin. Another took a sip of whiskey between bites, as if negotiating a truce between liquids. The dog sniffed the air, then retreated under the table. It knew its limits. You finished the egg. You sat still, letting the vinegar settle into your blood and thoughts. It cleaned something out, though you weren't sure what. Maybe the stew, maybe your past, perhaps just your sinuses. And then, as the barkeep wiped down the counter with a rag older than memory, someone new stepped through the door. She was tall, tired, and carrying a burlap sack. She dropped it onto the bar with a heavy thud. The barkeep looked inside and smiled. "Cornmeal," he said. That could mean only one thing. Tomorrow there'd be cornbread, hot, golden, just a little sweet, and if you were lucky, served with a slice of history. By morning, the mood in the saloon had shifted. The vinegar tang of pickled eggs was gone, replaced by something gentler, warm, golden, and deeply familiar. A sweet scent drifted through the air, subtle but certain, like sunlight passing through linen. You followed it without thinking. You knew it before you saw it. Cornbread. It was pulled from the oven in heavy cast iron pans, their edges snapping with butter, their centers rising in proud, slow domes the color of sunshine. No announcement, no shout from the kitchen. The soft sound of a knife sliding through the crust, and the whole saloon leaning forward like trees toward the light. A plate landed in front of you. The slice was thick, hardy. Steam spiraled lazily from the center. The crust was perfectly browned, just crisp enough before giving way to softness. This kind of bread made you sit up straighter without knowing why. You took the first bite, warm, tender. It's slightly sweet, but not enough to make you suspicious. Its texture was between cake and bread, firm enough to hold its shape and soft enough to remember your teeth. The taste was rich with butter and cornmeal, with a whisper of wood smoke from the fire where it was born. Cornbread was the saloon's quiet gift, a reminder that not everything had to be pickled, burned, or mysterious. It was simple, trustworthy, a staple across campsites, cabins, chuck wagons, and saloons. It required no explanation. Just flour, cornmeal, a little lard, and the patience to get it right. Around the room, it was being eaten with reverence. Some drizzled honey over theirs, letting it soak in until it glowed like amber. Others crumbled it into their coffee, softening each bite with warmth and memory. Some simply broke it apart with their fingers, slow and absent-minded, as if the act nourished more than the food. You took another bite. It tasted like peace, like mornings that began without gunshots. Like home if home could travel and be served on a tin plate. Each crumb was a small comfort, something solid in a world that shifted with the wind. And it filled you. Not just your belly, but something else. A quieter hunger. The kind that doesn't live in your stomach, but somewhere behind your ribs. You hadn't known it was there until the cornbread touched it. The cook offered a refill. You accepted. Of course you accepted. By the third slice, the world had softened. Light streamed through the saloon's window, painting the wooden floor in gold. The creaking of the boards wasn't a warning anymore. It had rhythm. Even the dog by the stove gave a contented sigh, as if warmed from within. But nothing good stays simple forever. From behind the bar, a crash rang out. A glass jar had shattered. You looked up to see the bartender holding a rag in one hand and a look of regret in the other. Brine spread across the floor, floating gently in a mess. Something pale, soft, and vaguely square. Tofu. A whisper moved through the saloon. Confusion, curiosity. One word hovered in the air like a prairie breeze. Imported. Because tomorrow, ready or not, the saloon would be serving the most controversial dish yet. Fried tofu. And around here, that was practically sorcery. It crinkled like dry parchment as he lifted it from the tin box. Thin, dark, shimmering seaweed. The saloon froze. Forks halted mid-air. Someone by the window tipped their hat, not out of respect, but from deep existential confusion. From the coast, the cook muttered, brought in dry, like most things, really. You watched him work. The seaweed slid into a pot of boiling water, quiet as a secret. Then came slices of ginger, a splash of soy sauce from a chipped bottle, and in a motion that felt like witchcraft, a few drops of sesame oil. The aroma that rose was astonishing, not unpleasant, just wrong. As if it belonged entirely to another world. A world without dust, without boots, without bar fights over jacks and queens. You were served a bowl. It was light, clear. Flecks of green seaweed swirled like ink in the warm wind. There were cubes of tofu, slivers of scallion, and a scent of waves buried beneath it all. Salt, depth, and distance. You took a sip, and for a brief, fragile moment, you forgot where you were. It's warm but not heavy. It's savory but not fishy. The seaweed was soft, silky, not rubbery, not soggy. The broth tasted like water, remembering something, then whispering it gently to you. A hint of toasted sesame lingered, faint as a memory. You sipped again, slower this time. This wasn't food to fuel a cattle drive or calm down brawlers. This was quiet food, reflective food, food that asked you to sit still, not because it filled you, but because it asked you to listen. Around the saloon, men were doing something rare, eating quietly, without rush. Some even closed their eyes. One cowboy took off his hat and placed it respectfully on the table. A gambler hummed a soft tune he didn't know he knew. Even the bartender, hair saltier than most brines, held his bowl in both hands like it might drift away if he didn't. This soup didn't demand attention. It didn't impress. It simply soothed. It reminded you that food isn't always survival. Sometimes it's recollection. Sometimes it's the feel of water on your feet, wind in your hair, a fire that doesn't need to hurry. Strange, yes, foreign, but also deeply human. You drank every last drop. The cook said nothing. I just nodded like a gunslinger might, but only with a ladle instead of a revolver. And as he cleared your bowl, he reached for something you hadn't seen in days. A round lump of dough, leavened. He punched it down gently, dusted the counter with flour, and began shaping it with slow, practiced hands. Someone gasped, because in this saloon, everything was dry, fried, stewed, or pickled. And now he was making bread. Real bread, soft bread. Bread with a crust you could knock on like a front door. The tables had been cleared. The air had changed. Gone was the herbal steam of seaweed and broth. What rose now was warmer, earthier sourdough and smoke, flour and flame. The unmistakable promise of bread. Real bread. Not hardtack, not biscuits, not something fried, pickled, or soaked over fire. This was the bread that breathed, that rose, slowly, intentionally, as if there were no better place to be. The cook worked in near silence. The dough, dusted in flour, was soft like a cloud that forgot how to float. He stretched it, folded it, and pressed it down again with the careful hands of someone handling either a newborn or a live explosive. One more rise, one more pause. No one moved too loudly. No one complained about the wait. Because here, real bread wasn't just food. It was an event. He slid it into the oven. Time thickened. Cards were reshuffled. Boots slowed their rhythm. Even the piano player stopped pretending to play and leaned into the quiet. Then a scent, rich, deep, slightly tangy at the edges. Butter is waiting on a surface. It rolled out of the oven and curled through the saloon like a warm hand across tired shoulders. When it finally emerged, the whole room leaned forward. Golden brown, round, cross-slashed on top, like a map to a better life. A soft crack escaped as he sliced into it, steam rising from inside like a breath held too long. Inside, pale, tender, airy in a way most men here hadn't felt since childhood. A slice was placed before you, still warm. The crust crackled as you pressed your knife through. You spread a thin pad of butter over the top, not because it needed it, but because the ritual demanded it. You bite. The crust is crisp, yet yielding. The crumb is chewy with a depth of flavor only time and patience can provide. It tasted like care, like waiting. Some people believed that doing things slowly was worthwhile. Even here, where most things were done in haste or not at all. Aimed back, watching the last curl of steam drift up to the ceiling, you heard a familiar sound from behind. Clink. A spoon against a glass jar. You squinted. The cook reappeared, holding something delicate, glowing faintly beneath the lantern light. Jam. He was opening a jar of jam. And tomorrow morning, if the fermentation gods were kind, this saloon would be serving toast. Dawn is slipping across the rooftops with the lazy confidence of someone who knows fresh bread is waiting. In the saloon, the cook is already up. The fire is lit. The knife is warm from use. And the jar is beside him, open on the counter like a treasure chest. Jam. You recognize it from last night. Deep red, thick, seeded, and full of sunshine. Maybe raspberry, maybe blackberry, or whatever fruit survived the westward journey in a sack wrapped in straw and prayer. It glows in the morning light, not brightly, but warmly like a lantern flickering behind stained glass. The bread, of course, is yesterday's miracle, sliced thick, toasted on a skillet until the edges darken and crackle. Each piece is turned by hand. No rushing. The cook doesn't believe in burned bread, not anymore. You get your slice on a tin plate, still warm, still singing. He spoons a dollop of jam on top. No butter, no garnish, just a thick swirl, glistening as it slowly melts into the surface. The saloon is quiet. No shouting, no footsteps. Even the dog by the fire doesn't move. This is sacred work now. Toast with jam isn't a side dish here. It's the beginning of something hopeful. A small sunrise. You lift it carefully. The crust crackles beneath your fingers. The jam glistens at the edge, threatening to drip. You take a bite. The toast is golden and rich, but it melts gently. The jam is bright, tart, sweet, slightly sticky. It tastes like late summer, like a hand-picked moment sealed in a jar for winter. Seeds crack between your teeth. Sugar hums at the back of your throat. And for one glorious bite, nothing can hurt you. You chew slowly. Toast with jam is rare here. You need real bread, real fruit, and silence for the sweetness to speak. No one devours it. No one adds whiskey or salted pork. This is food for quiet mornings and slower thoughts around you. Others eat the same. Some spread the jam thin, making it last. Others pile it on greedily. The gambler at the end of the bar closes his eyes after each bite, as if remembering a childhood he's not sure he ever had. No one says anything. There's nothing to say. This isn't nourishment. This is grace. You wipe a smear of jam from the corner of your mouth. You consider licking the plate, but don't. Not out of pride, but because you want to leave just enough for the memory to stay warm. The cook nods in quiet satisfaction. Then, as he dries his hands, you notice a small sack tucked beneath the counter. He pulls it out carefully and pours something smooth and pale into a bowl. Flour. Number 2, light. Cornmeal. You blink. Someone leans in, whispering the word like a spell. Pudding. Because tonight, after a long day, after dust, heat, gambling, and beans, there will be pudding. Warm, soft, sweet as saloon pudding. That word drifted through the saloon like wood smoke curling into the morning air. Pudding. No one repeated it. They didn't need to. The sound sank into the room's corners, wrapped around the ceiling beams, and made the grizzled regulars sit up straighter. You oversaw the cook. He worked slowly, deliberately. Cornmeal, yes. A pot of milk warming on the stove, a handful of sugar, a pinch of salt, then the barest touch of vanilla. A rare indulgence here, traded for silence and silver. He stirred patiently, constantly. It was as if he weren't making dessert, but remembering it. You smelled at first, warm cream, toasted sugar, something soft and round in the nose. No edges, no challenge. It's just the culinary version of a hug. It spread slowly through the room, tamed it, tamed you. The pudding thickened. You heard the spoon shift from water to velvet, from swirling to resistance. The cook nodded. It was ready. A ladle dipped in, the pudding poured out, and when your bowl was placed in front of you, it didn't look like much. Pale, smooth, barely steaming. The surface trembled slightly like it belonged in a saloon of boots, bullets, and bad poker hands. You dipped your spoon in. The texture pushed back, then gave way, a gentle slide. You lifted it. I watched the light catch on the glossy surface. Then I tasted it. It was warm, not hot, not heavy, just warm. Something that filled your mouth, chest, and small, quiet place beneath your ribs that had forgotten what kindness tasted like. Sweet, but not loud. The vanilla whispered at the edges. The milk was rich. The sugar hummed on your tongue like a lullaby in a language you used to know but forgot. And the texture, oh, the texture, software. Silky, a sigh disguised as food. You ate slower than you meant to. Around you spoons tapped gently. No words were spoken. Even the usual chewing seemed hushed, blurred by the quiet magic of pudding. A man across from you dabbed at his eyes with a napkin. They claimed it was dust. You believed him. Mostly pudding isn't typical here. It requires patience, gentle heat, ingredients that don't punch your mouth, and above all, trust. You have to believe that not everything needs to be hard to be worth it. You scrape the last bit from the sides of the bowl. Then I lick the back of the spoon. No shame, not tonight. The cook cleared the dishes in silence. He didn't smile, but his step was lighter now, as if this small act had tilted the world back into place. And then he reached into a tall wooden cabinet, retrieved a wrapped bundle of cloth, and laid it gently on the counter. You saw a puff of flour, something dense, round, pressed into shape. Someone leaned forward and whispered, half fearful, half reverent, "Is that pastry dough? Because tomorrow the saloon will serve pie. Real pie with crust, with filling with stories baked straight into every seam." You could feel it before you saw it. The silence, the shift in posture, the way people watched the cook's hands, like he was about to play a hymn. Pie. It wasn't ready yet, but it had been promised. And in this town, the promise of pie meant something. The dough was firm, pale, and calm beneath the cook's palms. He rolled it gently, didn't press, just coaxed, dusted it with flour like snowfall that only happens indoors. Then came the fold, the lift, the careful placement into a pan older than the bar stool and nearly as worn. No one spoke. He reached for the filling. Not meat, not beans, not anything stewed, stretched, or suspicious. This was fruit. Preserved, yes, but honest. Raspberries or maybe cherries or both. The smell rose thick, sweet, wild. The sweetness that doesn't come from sugar alone, but from something that once hung under the sky and drank the sunlight. He poured it in. The berries settled thick and glossy, flecked with spice, cinnamon, nutmeg, or maybe just the scent of memory. Then the top crust, not just laid on, but woven. Woven of all things, like someone had time, like someone cared. You stared at the lattice. It wasn't perfect. One strip is wider than the next. A corner was slightly torn, but it was real. It was human. It was beautiful in the way this town rarely allowed. The pie went into the oven. The fire crackled. Time expanded. The room drew in closer. Like a family gathering, not by blood, but hunger. You didn't need to be told when it was done. The scent would say to you, loud, clear, gentle. He sliced slowly. Steam rose from the center. The crust flaked but didn't crumble. The filling clung to the knife. Slow, soft. A slice fell into your bowl, warm, fragile, whole. You took a bite. The crust gave way gently, then melted into butter. The filling was tart and rich, the fruit flavor that made your jaw tightened for a second before relaxing into a soft humming. Yes, the heat reached the core, the sweetness clung to your mers like a lullaby. You ate slowly, carefully, not out of fear, but reverence. Because this pie wasn't just good. It tasted good, preserved, remembered. The taste of someone passing down a recipe by hand, not voice. A bite of something older than sorrow, but sweeter than silence. Around you, others were doing the same. The saloon was quiet, not silent, just full. Full in the way only pie can make a place. You wiped the edge of the plate with your finger and licked it. The cook didn't look up, but you knew he knew. And then he moved again, slowly. I opened a drawer. I took out a tin with a shaky handwritten label. Lemon, someone whispered. You sat up straighter, because while pie warms the heart, lemonade, cold, tart, and rare as a July breeze, is the thing that chases out the ghosts still hiding in your throat. It all started with the pop of a lid. A simple sound, but it was a revelation in a saloon powered mostly by smoke, beans, and burnt coffee. Lemon powder. The cook held it gently, as if it might disappear if stared at too long. Inside the tin, pale yellow dust, fine as sand, light as moonlight, and scented like something pulled from memory, not a market. He spooned it carefully into a pitcher, added cold water drawn from the well that morning. A bit of sugar, stirred slowly. The whole room watched in silence, as if someone had summoned rain. You were served in a metal cup, already beaded with condensation. Cold. So cold it shocked you. It was as if the water remembered a stream from which it had flowed long ago. The lemon hit first with a hint of citrus, clean, sharp and soft, then turned tart, tempered by just enough sugar to smooth the edge without dulling it. You took a sip. It didn't just touch your tongue. It woke it up. The chills slid down your throat like a curtain being pulled back, revealing something beneath you'd forgotten was there. You hadn't even been thirsty. Not until now. Now you couldn't stop. The second sip came quicker, the third deeper. By the fourth, you felt it in your chest. Not the drink itself, but the absence of warmth it chased away. Lemonade in a saloon wasn't just a novelty. It was a contradiction. A golden flicker through the dust. It didn't belong here. That's precisely why it mattered. The gambler beside you took a long draw from his cup and exhaled like he'd been holding his breath since spring. A woman in a sun hat dipped a rag and pressed it to her brow. The bartender, for once, poured around without a trace of sarcasm. This wasn't just refreshment. This was restoration. Here, water is precious, sweetness even more so. Citrus, nearly mythical. But when they come together like this, it's not just lemonade. It's forgiveness in a cup. You drank slowly. Not because you wanted to, but because you had to. Because this moment would end. You tried to stretch it one sip longer. The cook refilled the pitcher, this time dropping in a sprig of mint someone had left behind in a poker game 2 months ago. No one objected. No one questioned. Some flavors are too rare to second-guess us. And just as the last cups were set down, empty, sweating, content, a familiar scent began to waft from the kitchen. Pepper, paprika, and something roasted. You heard the skillet before you saw it. And you knew before anyone spoke a word that someone somehow had made potatoes. Crisp, golden fried potatoes. And in the Wild West, that wasn't just food. That was a miracle in motion. The first sound was the crackle. Sharp, confident. Dozens of tiny sizzles announced the arrival of something extraordinary. Then came the smell. Roasted skin, hot oil, black pepper, and just enough brown onion to make a grown man nostalgic for a home he's never had. You looked toward the stovetop. Potatoes, thick cut, skillet fried, crisp at the edges, and curled at the corners like they were smiling at you. The cook stirred them with a long-handled spoon, coaxing them toward golden perfection with the patience of a man burned too many times to rush anything anymore. A hot plate landed in front of you. No garnish, no ceremony, just a pile of potatoes browned and blistered with flecks of salt catching the lantern light and an aroma that reminded your mouth what true hunger once felt like. You pierced one with your fork. It shattered crisp on the outside, then yielded to something soft, fluffy, and deeply comforting. The flavor wasn't fancy, just honest, earthy, roasted. It was like someone had finally figured out how to turn survival into satisfaction. These weren't breakfast potatoes. They weren't dinner potatoes. They were every kind of potatoes. The kind that shows up when the flour runs low and beans have worn out their welcome. The type that saves the day, not with flair, but with golden-hearted sincerity. You chewed slowly, not to draw it out, but to let it linger. Here, potatoes aren't just food. They're fallback, foundation, filler, but when sliced thick, seasoned right and fried in hot fat until the edges curl like autumn leaves, they become something else entirely. They become trust. A potato never lies. It tells you what it is with every bite. No tricks, no disguises, just fire, salt, and time. Around the saloon, folks ate without talking, not out of reverence but rhythm. Bite, chew, exhale, bite, chew, sip. The cook nodded to himself. He didn't smile. He just knew. You reached for another. This one had a bit of onion clinging to it. Blackened and sweet, almost like jam. It added depth. Surprise, you nearly closed your eyes. And then from somewhere in the kitchen, a sharp clang. Metal on wood. A skillet dropped with force, not anger, emphasis. The cook turned. He wiped his hands. I reached under the counter and pulled out a wrapped bundle, thin, flat, wrapped in wax paper. Someone leaned forward. Jerky, they whispered, because the next dish in the saloon's silent menu was the most portable, chewable, and enduring food on the frontier. Beef jerky, the snack that dares you to bite forever, but never lets go. No crinkle when unwrapped, no steam, no sizzle, no sigh. It simply is jerky. Flat, dark, edges twisted slightly like it's heard too many secrets. The cook lays down the first strip with a quiet kind of authority. Not reverence, but resignation. He knows what this is, what it does, what it demands. You pick it up. It's light but dense. The surface is rough, like tree bark or leather left too long under a punishing sun. You bend it gently. It resists. Of course it does. Jerky never yields easily. You bite and chew again. Your jaw cacks like an old porch swing. Your teeth argue with sinew. The flavor arrives slowly, like an old friend who never knocks. Just opens the door and leans in with a casual, "Hey, it's salty, a bit smoky. There might be a pepper, clove, or just thyme. It isn't tender, but it's worth it. Like something you earn, not something you're given. Here, jerky isn't a snack. It's a strategy, a survival pact. Meat, salt, air, and patience. The only 4 ingredients needed to keep hunger at bay for 3 solid days. It doesn't spoil. It doesn't complain. It just endures, waits, and reminds you that food doesn't have to be soft to be loyal. You keep chewing. And as the muscle breaks down under pressure, as the flavor spreads in slow layers, not bursting, but unfolding, you realize this isn't just meat. Its memory compressed the hunt. The smokehouse, the dry wind slipped through racks while someone watched the horizon, hoping nothing worse than hunger was coming. Jerky tastes like caution, like travel, like long roads and longer silences. It was made to last and help you last too. The gambler at the following table pulls a piece from the shared dish. Bites, nods once. He keeps chewing like he's repaying an old debt. Strangely enough, the piano player dips his piece into whiskey before eating it. No one stops him. Every man has his ritual. You try a second piece. This one's hotter, spicier at the back. It surprises you, not because it burns, but because it feels alive, like something that once ran. Like something that never forgot the meaning of motion. And then just as you're settling into the chewing rhythm, gazing into the middle distance, you hear a sound. Software satisfying. A cork popping. You turn. The bartender is pouring from a tall green bottle, thick glass. Label faded. The liquid that spills out is amber, golden, almost glowing. This isn't whiskey, it's me. Honey wine. And suddenly, after all the salt, smoke, and sun-dried willpower, sweetness returns. But this time, it's fermented. It catches the light differently. Not sharp like whiskey. It's not dull like cloudy beer, but gold like bottled sunset. The mead glows faintly as it swirls in the bartender's hand. Thick, syrupy, ancient. He pours it slowly as if afraid to wake something. You're handed a short glass. No ice, no garnish, just a gentle pour of fermented honey in years. You bring it to your nose. The scent is deep, sweet and floral with something wild beneath. Something that smells like it once belonged to a field. You take a sip and everything stops. The sweetness is real, but not childish. Not the bursting sugar of candy canes or overcooked jam. This is mature sweetness. A sweetness that's been through things. It rolls across your tongue like warm silk. There's a murmur of alcohol beneath, but no burn, only warmth. Slow and low, spreading through your chest, like a story told from the inside. Mead isn't made for the cowboys, it's made for bards. For warriors returning from battle, for quiet evenings in places where time moves slowly. No one can say how it ended up here in a saloon wedged between dust and desperation. But in your hand, it feels perfectly at home. You sip again, slower this time. Now you taste the layers. Wildflower, clover, maybe a hint of herbs at the end. Thyme, lavender, or is it just the memory of someone who once whispered in the dark? It's not strong, but it doesn't need to be. This isn't the drink that gets you drunk. It's the drink that puts you to sleep. Sitting up around you, the room shifts. The piano has gone silent. The dice remain still. Even the gambler chews slower now, lost in thought. Mead does that. It doesn't loosen tongues. It stills them. It doesn't burn the day down. It smooths the edges until even regret feels like something round and graspable. You finish your glass and let the aftertaste linger. It tastes like patience, like sweetness that waited, like something sacred that didn't mind being forgotten, so long as it could be remembered like this. And just as you melt into that gentle hush, the cook clears his throat. He's holding something around. Brown tied with twine, a pouch. He opens it, dips in. He pulls out a rough handful, drops it into a bowl with a solid clatter. You blink. It's ridiculous. Roasted, cracked, spiced. And just like that, the saloon returns, not loud, but alert. Because the next stop on your frontier journey is a bowl of trail mix and the unforgettable sound of the crunch. The bowl didn't look like much. No steam rising like a revelation, no scent demanding attention, just an old, humble tin bowl set gently on the table, half full of something the color of dusty bark and over-toasted bread. Trail nuts, roasted, cracked, uneven. The kind of snack that doesn't announce itself. It just arrives, lies down, and waits for you to notice. At first glance, it's unimpressive. A mix of walnuts, pecans, and maybe a few stubborn almonds with skins still clinging like bitter memories. Some were whole, others were broken, chipped from long rides in burlap sacks tied to wagon axles. You reach in, fingers brushing the jagged edges of roasted history, and lift one out. Warm, not fresh, but recently stirred. Dry, slightly oily in the way that leaves just enough sheen on your fingertips to remind you these once lived, grown, picked, processed, roasted, and now here in your hand, waiting. You press it gently between your fingers. It cracks softly, not loudly, not in protest. It's more like a sigh. The fragments fall into your palm, revealing the meat within. Wrinkled, firm, with a faint scent of smoke and earth. You pop a piece into your mouth. Crunch. It's not exciting. It's not sweet. It's not loud, but it's right. The texture is firm but pleasant. The flavor blooms slowly, earthy at first, then just a hint of natural oil and something like old sunlight. Perhaps the memory of the tree it came from. A little bitterness, a little nut in the truest sense of the word. You chew slowly, thinking, swallow, and reach for another. Trail nuts aren't meant to satisfy. They're made for moments like this. Between sips, between thoughts, between regrets. They're a filler, a tether. a way to keep your hands busy when your heart doesn't know what to do next. You watch the others around the saloon. The gambler in the corner peels each one, lining the halves neatly beside his flat beer. A dusty, hated man tosses them in the air, catching them with a lazy skill that suggests he's done this more often than he's slept indoors. Even the bartender chews absent-mindedly, fingers stained with tobacco, eyes far off. The bowl sits in the middle of the table like a quiet invitation. No one talks about it, no one praises it. But piece by piece, handful by handful, it disappears. Some are salty, some are stale. One almond nearly cracks a tooth, but you chew anyway. There's comfort in repetition. Crack, chew, reach. It asks nothing of you. It doesn't surprise you. That matters more than most people realize in a world full of gunpowder and bad timing. You remember something your grandfather once said, or maybe someone else's grandfather, about how nuts are food for thinking men. Slow food. Food that doesn't bother you, just walks beside you. You believe it now. You eat more. A walnut tastes sweeter than the others. Maybe it's old. Perhaps it's cursed. You don't care. The air in the saloon goes quiet again. The kind of quiet that follows warmth. Not the silence of tension, but the silence of digestion, of bodies settling and hearts gently loosening at the seams. Outside, the wind picks up. You hear it tug at the shutters like a child testing the edge of sleep. Inside, you reach for another nut. It's already cracked. The work's been done. All that's left is the taste. You wonder how far this little snack has traveled. From a distant orchard, a dry hillside through 6 hands or 60 before it fell into your palm. You'll never know. But that makes it taste better. Like mystery slow roasted over low heat. There's something sacred in the way these nuts vanish. Not in a flash, not in hunger, but in slow, easy companionship. They sit quietly on your tongue, reminding you that flavor doesn't need to shout and fade before you realize they're gone. You pause, letting the last piece linger on your tongue. And that's when you hear it. The gentle ring of cast iron. A wooden ladle scraping the bottom of a pot. The unmistakable rustle of oats being poured slowly, steadily into something warm. You glance toward the kitchen. The cook is stirring with both hands slowly, rhythmically. Emotion is as old as stone circles and morning dew. Someone near the fire leans in and whispers as if afraid to wake a dream. Porridge. And you feel it. The pull of something soft, warm, older than all of this. Because next comes porridge. The first food of comfort. The kind that doesn't just feed you, but forgives you. Start with a slow, gentle stir. No crackling, no popping, no clinking iron, just a quiet, rounded rhythm. Oats and milk moving slowly in a thick-bottomed pot, as if they were only half awake. Porridge. In any other setting, it might be forgotten. A filler. Something you accept when the good things have run out. But in a tavern built on noise, grit, grease, and questionable decisions, porridge feels revolutionary here. You watch the cook closely. He stirs with purpose. No rush, no frustration, just steady, like someone remembering the weight of childhood mornings. He adds a pinch of salt, a bit of brown sugar, and then surprisingly a cinnamon stick dropped in like a promise. The scent is soft, warm in a way that doesn't fill the room but smooths its edges. It smells like something safe, like fabric warmed by sunlight, like stories told in soft voices without punchlines. When the final bowl is placed before you, it doesn't shimmer or sparkle. It glows dimly, like the memory of a campfire, like something still breathing. The porridge is thick and creamy, and oats are swollen with milk and thyme. No toppings, not yet. Just the basics. A pale golden pool daring you to pause. You take the first bite. Hot always. It warms you with steam, then wraps your tongue in warmth and softness. The oats have melted into each other. No grainy resistance, just gentle surrender. The sweetness is soft, subtle, not candy-like, but natural. The kind that whispers instead of winks. You chew slowly and you get it. Porridge isn't for curing hunger, it's for healing. The second bite tastes deeper. You find a pocket of cinnamon, a swirl of rich brown sugar, maybe a bit of butter. You're not even sure. Everything in the bowl has started to blur, to merge like feelings too close to separate. Around the tavern, the transformation is subtle. Men lean forward slightly, shoulders slacken, the usual sounds, boots on floorboards, mugs on tables, heavy sighs, all seem smaller now. The gambler adds a bit of cream to his bowl and stirs with the delicacy of a man who once lost a tooth to overcooked beans. Even the bartender eats standing up, one hand still polishing glasses, the other spooning bites like this is the last task of the day. Porridge is humble. It doesn't flash, it doesn't flirt, it simply shows up and keeps you warm. And that somehow feels rare. You reach the center of your bowl, where the sugar has pulled, the oats are thickest, and the spoon moves slowly. You pause. You let that bite sit on your tongue longer. It tastes like a morning that never needs to end. You shouldn't rush to finish. Porridge has its own pace. It doesn't matter how late it is. It doesn't need approval. It's the one food that forgives you while chewing it. The cook glides by with a dish of raisins, another of stewed apples, and a small tin of roasted pecans. No explanation, no pressure, just gentle offerings. You try each. They're good. Each adds something, a texture, a memory, but the porridge keeps its flavor. Even with nothing, it's still a song. There's something about food you don't have to earn. Most things here take effort. Meat must be hunted. Biscuits require teeth. Even stew demands trust. But porridge just wants you to feel full. A cowboy across the room is slurping from his bowl loudly. He catches your eye and shrugs. "Reminds me of before I knew how bad the world could be," he says. You nod because it's true. You slowly scrape your spoon along the bottom of the bowl. Not because you're still hungry, but because you're not ready to be done. Some meals fill your stomach, others fill the space between. You don't realize your hand rests on your belly until someone laughs at the bar. Not loudly, just a breathy chuckle, a release of tension that had been sitting on the rafters for days. At that moment, the cook reaches under the counter and pulls out a strange-looking glass jar. Something thick and pale orange sloshes inside. He cracks the lid, sniffs once, and grins wide. "Peaches," he says. "Pickled." Someone gasps. Another lets out a sarcastic cheer. The gambler wipes his mouth like he's prepping for battle. Because after porridge, after the warmth, the softness, the internal quiet, comes a dish that wakes your tongue like a slap wrapped in syrup. Pickled peaches, sweet, sour, tender, sharp, and completely unashamed to be alive. The jar looked like a dare. Not large, not heavy, but faintly glowing under the lantern light, as if it knew it didn't belong here, yet refused to apologize. Inside, hulled peaches suspended in a syrup that leaned more toward vinegar than sugar, more spice than sweet, a soft orange, tinged with amber, like a bottled sunrise. You could already smell them, tangy, floral, and sharp enough to make your ears whisper warnings. The cook opened the jar. A soft pop, a hiss of trapped air. The scent burst out immediately. Sweet at first, like canned fruit from home, but chased by a sharp vinegar-soaked bitterness. Something bold, something sure of itself, pickled peaches. He ladled one out carefully, not with tongs, but with a long-handled spoon, as if serving something sacred. The peach dropped into your tin bowl with a soft thunk. Still whole, still lovely, still glistening. You stared at it. It stared back. No steam, no crisp, no character, just syrup, skin, and quiet tension. You sliced it with the edge of your spoon. It yielded instantly, the flesh folding into slow silk-like creases. You brought a bite to your lips and paused, because everyone was watching, not with judgment, but with recognition. They'd been here before. They knew what was coming. You bit, and your whole mouth woke up. Sweet. Of course it was lovely, but that wasn't what you noticed first. Number first came the sour. Vinegar struck the sides of your tongue like curse lightning. Then sugar softened the edges, making it pleasant, even playful. The peach itself was soft, slick, and slightly chilled. Familiar, yet dangerous. It wasn't like anything else you'd had here. It wasn't comforting. It was startling. It flirted, it teased, it bounced once, then danced away before you could get too close. You chewed slowly. You blinked once. You took another bite. This time your taste buds were ready. They knew the map. The vinegar didn't slap. It sang. The sugar didn't coat. It complemented. And beneath it all, the fruit still whispered of orchards and sun-hot July afternoons, long before it was steeped in spice and acid and sealed in glass. Someone across the saloon gave a low whistle. "Yep," he said, "they're still weird." Another nodded. "Weird ain't bad." You agreed silently. Pickled peaches are rare out west, not because they're hard to make, but because they require a boldness most cooks don't bother with. You have to take something already good, ripe, juicy, sweet, and do something to it. Risk ruining it. Risk improving it. They never taste the same twice. Depending on the vinegar, the spice, the sugar, even the bottler's mood, they can be sweet and mild or sharp enough to make your eyes water. This batch balanced just right. You finished the peach. The syrup at the bottom of the bowl beckoned. You tipped it and let a few drops hit your tongue. It burned just a little, but it was a clean burn. It's a good burn. It reminded you were still alive. The cook passed by, setting something new on a plate. Something square, thin, brown. You frowned. "Is that cake?" He shook his head. "Gingerbread," he said, and suddenly the room felt playful again. Because after vinegar and spice, after sour and surprise, after waking your tongue with something pickled and strange, it's time to sink into molasses and warmth, into gingerbread baked so dark it practically hums. It looked like a shadow, dark, dense, rising just slightly from the plate. A square-cut piece with quiet precision. Sharp edges, a soft center, and an aroma so rich it almost felt out of place. Gingerbread. The cook said it plainly, without ceremony. He set the plate down and walked away as if tossing a log on the fire. As if this weren't a miracle made of molasses. But you knew better. You could smell the ginger, sharp and spicy, wrapped in brown sugar and something darker. Cinnamon, clove, maybe, and something burned but not ruined. Something intentional. You picked it up. It was heavier than expected, moist, still warm. You pressed it gently, and it bounced back like it remembered what shape it was supposed to be. You took your first bite. It gave way softly between your teeth. The crust along the edge had a faint crispness, but inside it melted, slowly, richly, like earth turned into dessert. The flavor came in waves. First the ginger, bold and assured. Then the low hum of molasses, dark enough to feel ancient. Not exactly sweet, just serious. Gingerbread is no flirt. It doesn't wink or tease. It leans in and tells you the truth. This isn't a celebration cake. It's recovery for nights longer than usual. For when the cold slips through cracks and into your bones. When you're tired of vinegar, salt, and gunpowder. All you want is something that understands. You chew slowly, letting each bite linger on your tongue. No frosting, no glaze, just the quiet comfort of a recipe passed down by hands that didn't waste time on decoration. This wasn't made to impress. It was made to stay. Around the saloon, others were getting their slices too. One man broke a corner off and held it up to the light, like checking for gold. Another crumbled his into coffee, turning the whole cup into December. Even the bartender, who had only sipped warm beer for hours, sliced his piece in two and pocketed one for later. No one spoke. They just chewed and remembered things. Because that's the strange magic of gingerbread. It never arrives alone. It brings memories with it. Of houses you haven't seen in years. Of firelight flickering against cracked plaster. Of grandmother's knuckles, floured and bent with purpose. You finished your piece slowly, gently, gratefully, and just as you were about to lean back, letting the warmth settle in your ribs and rest there until sunrise. Once again, the cook wasn't finished. He returned with something even stranger in the setting. Small brown cups, glazed, steaming. The smell was familiar but not recent. You leaned forward. "Corey," someone said, and your brain caught up. Coffee, but not quite. The roasted root version. The drink of people with low incomes. The fuel of farmers. The tavern's quiet secret. Because what came next, brewed low and bitter, was Corey coffee. Hot, earthy, and stubbornly awake. It's not quite coffee, not the kind that makes your teeth grind and stirs up your sins. This is something older, gentler, but no less severe. Chori, roasted root, finely ground, steeped long until the water is as dark as storm clouds and carries the scent of scorched wood and damp soil. The cook didn't call it coffee, he just poured it. The cups were mismatched, heavy, speckled with years of stories. No cream, no sugar, no milk to soften the edge. Just a black, honest drink. Hand it over like a quiet truth no one wants to admit, but everyone needs to hear. You took the cup. Too hot to sip just yet. You cupped it in your hands, letting the warmth soak into your palms. Then deeper. Steam rose in slow curls, carrying a scent that wasn't appealing, but was comforting. You took the first sip. It wasn't enjoyable. It's not like coffee is bitter. Coffee bites. Corey lingers. It clings to the corners of your mouth like a rumor. Roasty, smoky, slightly nutty, slightly medicinal, like something your great grandmother might have brewed when no one else was looking. You sipped again. This time you tasted more. The depth, the dryness, a rough smoothness like riverstone after rain. It didn't jolt you awake. It simply opened your eyes and said, "You're still here. Might as well sit up." Chori coffee isn't a luxury out here. It's a necessity, a placeholder, a solution. People turn to roasted roots when beans are scarce and sleep is not. Dandelion, barley, and Corey, the king of imposters. Not a substitute, but a reimagining. A horse isn't a carriage, but it still gets you down the road. You watch the others drink. The gambler sipped slowly, pinky raised like a joke no one laughed at. The piano player held his cup to his chest, as if it were a love letter he'd never sent. Even the cook sat down just once to drink quietly, eyes on the floor, remembering something or someone. No one gulped. This was a traveler's drink, a silence between bites drink, a spine-straightening drink after a night of stew, salt, syrup, and smoke. You stared into your cup. The surface was still black, reflective. You saw your face there, tired but soft, like the Corey, a rough root roasted into something almost kind. You sipped again. The flavor never sweetened. It didn't evolve. But it got easier, more familiar, like an old coat that still fits, even when nothing else does. There's strength in bitterness, a refusal to pander. Corey doesn't need your approval. It only asks for your attention. And if you give it that a little time, a little heat, it rewards you with calm. The cook poured a second round. You accepted without hesitation. This time you added a splash of molasses from a forgotten dish near the sugar tin. It didn't mellow the taste, it deepened it. The drink thickened slightly, becoming something almost luxurious. Not elegant, but earned. A man at the bar mumbled something about New Orleans, about Corey, milk, and a cafe where people wrote poetry about revolution. No one answered, but the thought hung in the air like the last note of a hymn. You finished your second cup. The room now felt quieter, not asleep, but silent. The kind that comes after long meals and longer thoughts. And just as you were about to set your cup down for the final time, the cook stood again. Because of course he wasn't done. He pulled something wrapped in thin cloth from a cabinet behind the stove, unwrapped it carefully like a letter never opened. Inside, pale white, soft. He lifted it gently, placed it on a small wooden board, and began to slice. The cuts fell with a sound almost too quiet to hear. A slight resistance like snow beneath a dull blade. You squinted. Someone beside you whispered almost reverently, "Go cheese." And suddenly your mouth remembered itself, because after all the bitterness, the boldness, the dark and heavy came the fresh tang of goat cheese. Calm, creamy, and unexpectedly gentle. It arrived like a secret, unwrapped by quiet hands. No steam, no fanfare, just a pale, soft mound on an old wooden board. Its surface dusted with cracked pepper and a pinch of salt. Goat cheese. It felt like someone had just placed a poem on the poker table in a tavern full of firewood, frying fat, and pickled proclamations. The cook sliced it thin, not because it needed to be rationed, but because that's how it worked best. Too thick and the flavor would overwhelm. Too little and you'd missed the point. He gently laid each slice onto a cracked ceramic plate beside a toasted rye. You accepted your portion, but you were unsure of what to expect. It looked soft, almost too smooth. It might sigh if you press it. You scoop it with a knife's edge and carefully spread it over the bread. It resisted slightly, not from stubbornness, but from confidence. You took a bite, and the world shifted. The first taste was creamy, lush, soft, full. Then came the tang, bright and persistent, cutting through the memory of Corey and gingerbread like a breeze through a smoke-heavy parlor. It didn't overpower. It clarified. You chewed slowly. The rye was firm, chewy, slightly bitter. It crushed the cheese. I held it in place. You took another bite, letting the cheese linger on your tongue. It tingled slightly. It almost fizzed at the back of your throat. It's a bit fermented. A nod to goat hillside wind. This wasn't cow cheese. It wasn't soft by accident. It was smooth because it didn't need armor. Goat cheese isn't common in taverns. It requires care. It sours quickly in the heat. It needs a cool cellar or a shaded porch and someone willing to stir gently. Strained slowly and salt without Russian. It's not cowboy food, it's craft. And yet here it was, in a room full of dust, noise and long memories. A quiet slice. The gambler folded his fried bread around it. The woman near the hearth ate hers with a knife and no bread. Even the bartender paused just once to spread a bit on the heel of an old biscuit. No one said much. No one needed to. The tang of the cheese lingered after each bite. It didn't cling to the mouth. It lifted it, cleansed it, refreshed without sweetness, restored without heat. And most of all, it made you want to sit up straighter just a little. Because goat cheese isn't sedating. It reminds of hunger, of goats on dusty cliffsides off roads no longer mapped, of someone in a cabin far from here stirring milk by lantern light, because that's how her grandmother did it and always would. The cook returned with a second round, topped with a slice of something red and glistening jam, maybe plum, maybe tomato. Either way, it wasn't to sweeten the cheese, but to challenge it, to meet its sharpness with its own. You tried it. The result was remarkable. Sweet and sour met at the center of your tongue, and you decided without struggle to hold hands. The jam softened the edge, the cheese anchored the sugar. Together they tasted like the end of a long conversation that started poorly but ended in understanding. Now you ate slower. Each bite became a thought. With each spreading of cheese, a quiet exhale. The fire was out. The piano was silent. Even the dog had stopped pretending to beg. The tavern was wrapped in the rarest of moods, contentment, but not for long, because the cook, never one to let stillness settle, set down a shallow earthen bowl. At first, no one reacted. Then someone leaned forward and squinted. "Beans," he said. The cook nodded. But not just any beans. Sweet-baked beans, dark as molasses, soft as memory, and quietly bubbling beneath a veil of smoke. You smell them before you see them. Not the usual bean scent, that bland, briny heaviness clinging to every miner's breath and every soldier's regret. Number, this is different. This is sweet. This is slow. Molasses hits first, dark, syrupy, rich like nightfall, then onion, barely caramelized, lurking somewhere in the background like a ghost with good intentions. And then the beans themselves, soft, nearly silky, floating in a sauce that isn't trying to impress you, but just trying to feed you. The cook sets the pot down carefully, not out of pride, not for performance, just the calm of someone who knows exactly what they're doing. You take your bowl, warm earthenware. They chipped slightly at the rim, like everything else around here. Inside a ladle full of deep gold. You take your spoon, press gently, and feel the resistance give way. These aren't canned beans of saddlebag rations and soldiers' regrets. These are beans that waited, were soaked, simmered, stirred, whispered to. They don't collapse, they sigh. You lift the spoon to your lips, and the world slows down. The sweetness arrives first, not loud, but deep. Molasses with a hint of brown sugar. Maybe a touch of maple, maybe not. The beans themselves taste buttery and soft, yet whole. You chew slowly, and somewhere mid-bite, a flicker of black pepper glints on your tongue and reminds you this is still the West. You go in again. This time you find a piece of salt pork, small, tender. Its fat has melted into the sauce, thickening and giving it heft without turning greasy. It tastes like patience, like firelight. And a day finally ended. No one talks much while eating sweet baked beans. Not because they're scared, but because they don't ask anything of you. They just are. Spoon after spoon, bite after bite. They fill you, but never weigh you down. The gambler stirs slowly, cooling each bite like he's afraid to ruin something too kind. A woman by the hearth crumbles cornbread over hers and stirs it like she's done it 100 times before. The bartender he eats, standing, turning his back to the room like a man who remembered his name. You take another bite. This one has a slight tang. Maybe apple cider vinegar, just enough to keep the sweetness upright. The beans coat your teeth, your tongue, your memory. There's a softness here that has nothing to do with texture. These beans, they don't fill a hole. They tuck you in. They were never meant to be charming. They don't change your life. But they stay. They linger in the corners of your thoughts long after the bowl is empty. And somehow if you came back to this tavern 10 years from now, they'd still be on the menu, still simmering and still waiting. You eat the last spoonful, let it sit in your belly like a small campfire. And then, as if he'd been waiting for that exact moment, the cook moves again. This time he brings no plate, no pot, no bowl. It's just a small jar, glass, square, sealed with wax. He gently sets it on the table as if it might explode if jostled. You lean forward. Inside, gold, clear, dimly sparkling even in the weak lantern light. Someone exhales through their nose and says almost in awe, "Quink jelly." Because after all that warmth, after molasses, pork, and soft simmered beans, comes something bright, a spoonful of compressed light in a jar. It glows, not brightly, not loudly, but unmistakably. The jelly in the jar looks like liquid amber, golden, soft, and almost unreal in a place built of wood smoke, grit, and sweat. It catches the lantern light at the edges, refracting just enough to make you blink twice. Quint jelly. The cook breaks the wax seal with the care of a man handling a memory. He slides a clean spoon inside and draws up a trembling scoop, barely holding its shape, nearly spilling over with light. He places the jar beside the beans like this is the natural order. As if sweetness, this clear golden thing, always follows salt and smoke. You hesitate because this isn't jam. Not in the usual sense. It's not smeared, slapped on, or scooped with abandon. This is jelly with restraint, with grace, with something ancient in its bones. You dip your spoon in. It resists just a little. Then it yields with a soft pop, breaking like still water. The jelly sparkles on its way up, smooth, translucent. No seeds, no pulp, just a pale flame wrapped in silver. You taste it and everything else disappears. No sourness, no bitterness, no aroma that overstays its welcome. Just pure apparent sweetness, the kind that doesn't coat your mouth but lifts it. A faint floral whisper, a hint of citrus. And beneath it all, the taste of something between an apple and a pear, but neither. Something older, stranger, more intentional. You chew, or instead you let it rest on your tongue. And you're not in a tavern for a moment, not in boots, not hearing wind-slap shutters. You're in a garden under sunlight, in a life that may have never existed. Quint is a fruit that demands work. You can't eat it raw, too hard, sour, or harsh. But simmer it, boil, coax, whisper sugar and patience into it, and it turns into something you'd swear was made of candlelight and violins. And that's what's in this jar. It's not just jelly, but labor and waiting and care. You take a second bite, slower. You close your eyes. It's soft, fragile, like sweetness borrowed from somewhere better and preserved in glass for days that don't deserve it. Around the room, spoons move with reverence. The gambler dabs a bit on the back of his knife and spreads it across a biscuit, like he's laying down the gold leaf. A woman by the heart dips shamelessly into the jar, sighing after each taste. Even the dog is watching, not begging, just respecting. You spread a thin layer onto the last rye crust from earlier. The contrast is startling. Bitter bread, sweet jelly. Together they become something balanced, like opposites shaking hands. This jelly isn't meant to fill you, it's here to remind you. Even in places full of dust and fire, there can be delicacy, there can be clarity. There can be a spoonful of something that has no business existing and yet does. And just as the last bit of jelly disappears into silent mouths and grateful quiet, the cook opens the final drawer. He reaches in and pulls out a tightly folded square of brown paper. He opens it slowly. Inside, dark, dense, speckled with something pale. You lean in. "That's ridiculous," someone whispers. Another sighs with walnuts, because after everything, the beans, the roots, the tang, the light, comes the final note, a sweet square that doesn't ask. It just melts. It's so small. It's just a little bigger than a matchbox. A dark brown square wrapped in brown paper and string, as if it had been sitting in a drawer, waiting for someone to need it, but never to ask for it. Fudge. The cook opens it with the same hands he used to season pork, stir beans, and ladle meat. But now those hands are slow, gentle, as if he knows what this bit of sweetness means in a place like this. He cuts it into smaller squares, one clean slice at a time. Inside, the fudge is dark and dense with fine threads of walnut running through it like roots in good soil. The smell is rich, cocoa, cream, and something lightly toasted. It doesn't spread, it doesn't fill the room. It just waits. You take your piece. It's heavier than it looks. Solid, cold at first, but softening instantly against your fingers. You bite, and in that moment, everything else fades. The texture is the first surprise. Firm on the outside, but then it disappears. It melts the second it meets your warmth. Not like chocolate. It's not like cake, but like something that always meant to become part of you. Sweet, yes, but not in a candy way. It's deeper, lower. It's like a cello instead of a whistle. The walnut cuts through the softness just enough. Earthy, a little bitter, a little rough. The perfect thing to remind you is that this is still the West, that nothing here stays soft for long, not even fudge. You chew slowly, let it be, let it grieve a little. Because this is it, isn't it? The final dish, the last page, the bite that says that's enough. Around the tavern, the shift is subtle. No one reaches for more, no one breaks the silence. Even the fire in the hearth burns lower and quieter, as if it has eaten well and is ready to rest. This fudge isn't meant to fill you, it's meant to close something, a meal, a memory, a moment. It tastes like something handmade when no one else is looking. Something stirred slowly, cut carefully, wrapped not to sell, but to keep safe. It tastes like love if love could be measured in butter, cocoa, and the patience to let it cool just right. You finish your piece, lick a bit of chocolate off your thumb. Exhale. You feel it settle in your chest like the final note of a lullaby. Warm, rounded, complete. The cook wipes the knife clean, wraps the rest, and returns it to the drawer. No one claps, no one cheers. No one needs to because everyone here understands. Fudge isn't a celebration, it's a blessing. A soft amen whispered into your bowl, one dish at a time at the end of a long prayer. And just as the room exhales in silence, the door cracks open a little. Cool air drifts in. It's not harsh, just real. Someone at the bar stands and stretches, and the cook, as if answering a question no one asked, lifts one final item from the counter. Not food, not drink. It's just a rolled, faded map. The kind that doesn't show roads, only rivers, stars, and the edges of what humans once dared to imagine. Because after eating, after the sweetness, after the warmth, the road returns, and the question, where do you go when the plates are clean? But the hunger is still awake. The map unfolds slowly. Its edges curl inward. Its surface cracks like dry skin. The ink has faded in some places, but the stars remain. Tiny black dots scattered across the parchment sky, marking rivers, mountains, ghost towns, and names spoken more often than written. The cook smooths it flat with both hands. He says nothing. He doesn't need to because this isn't a treasure map. It's a map for letting go entirely. You lean back in your chair, belly warm with beans, fudge, porridge, and pickled sweetness. But it's not just the food. It's the stillness, the way your shoulders have dropped without you noticing, how your eyes blink slower now, not from exhaustion, but from calm. The tavern has gone quiet. The plates are empty. The cups are dry. The dog by the fire has stopped pretending not to sleep. Even the lanterns seem to flicker a little softer, their light clinging to the beams like a gentle goodbye. You look around. No one rushes to leave. Not exactly, but you can feel it. The end of something. The shift from what's next to that was enough. The map rests on the counter. The cook doesn't point to anything. He just leaves it there. You get the sense he's done this before. Every person who walks in here leaves with a different destination. Not marked in ink, but in memory. And you? Well, it's already been packed, tucked into napkins, folded between toast and silence, slipped into your chest beside that last spoon of jelly. You rise. Not quite. Not yet. You let yourself linger a moment more, watching the fire sink into coals, hearing the last creak of boots on wood, smelling the last trace of roasted curry in the air. It's quiet, not empty, silent, the kind of quiet that means you are safe here. You nod once to the cook. He doesn't nod back, but you know he saw. That's enough. At the door, the night air greets you. Cool, dry, not cold. You take a breath, then another, and step outside. Behind you, the tavern doesn't vanish. It stays in your chest, in your bones. You now understand the worth of a meal that asked nothing of you, but gave everything. And somewhere out there, beneath a sky of stars, dust, and distant coyote howls, you know that if you ever return, there'll be a bowl of beans, a slice of cornbread, and someone stirring something slow in the kitchen, ready to say, "You look tired. Sit down." And until then, sleep well, stranger. Your belly is full, your road is long, and your story softly, beautifully begins again.